My name is Evelyn. I'm 72 years old, and what I'm about to share will make you question everything about family, loyalty, and how well we really know the people we love. 3 days ago, I buried my only son, David. He was only 38. Cancer. Devastating. Fast. Merciless. For months, I took care of him as best I could, while his wife, Sarah, seemed more and more distant. I thought it was shock, despair, how wrong I was. On the day of the funeral, my house was full. Relatives, friends, neighbors from Houston offering condolences. Sarah was there, dressed in black, receiving hugs, crying at the right moments. The perfect widow. But it was when everyone had left, when it was just me, her, and my 6-year-old grandson, Tommy, that my life turned upside down. Tommy walked up to me with those same blue eyes as his father's, tugged at my skirt, and whispered, "Grandma, Uncle Jason sleeps with Mommy every night." I felt my heart stop. Jason, David's younger brother. "Since when, sweetheart?" I asked, trembling. "Since Daddy got really sick and went to the hospital." 3 months. For 3 months, she had been betraying my son while he was wasting away in a hospital bed. Tommy's words echoed in my head like a hammer. Jason. The same Jason who cried at the funeral, who carried his own brother's coffin, who hugged me saying, "Aunt Evelyn, if you need anything, you can count on me." My mind began connecting the dots. Jason's frequent visits during David's illness. Sarah always saying he was helping with Tommy while she worked. The strange looks between them that I dismissed, thinking I was imagining things. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every moment from the past months. David hospitalized, suffering, asking for his wife, who had to work to keep the bills paid. Me bringing food to Sarah, finding Jason there, helping with the garden at 10 at night. Sarah refusing to let Tommy visit his father at the hospital, saying it was too traumatic for a child. Now I understood. She was protecting her secret, not my grandson. I remembered my son's last words. "Mom, take care of Tommy, and forgive Sarah if she can't be strong." He knew. My God! He knew and was asking me to forgive the betrayal. My chest tightened so much I thought I might have a heart attack right there. My son died knowing he was being betrayed by the woman who swore to love him in sickness and in health. And yet, he still thought of protecting her until the very end. The next day, I decided to confront Sarah. I couldn't keep this to myself. I went to her house at 9 a.m., still using the key David had given me years ago. The door was locked from the inside, something that never happened. I knocked. It took forever for Sarah to open, her hair messy, wearing a robe. "Evelyn, what are you doing here so early?" she asked nervously. "We need to talk about Jason," I said, looking straight into her eyes. I watched the color drain from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. At that moment, Tommy came running down the stairs. "Grandma! Uncle Jason made pancakes." My heart shattered again. Jason came down after him, shirtless, clearly embarrassed. The silence was deafening. "Aunt Evelyn, I can explain," Jason began, but I raised my hand. 3 months was all I could say. For 3 months you two were here, building this farce, while my son was wasting away in that hospital bed, asking for you. Sarah started crying. "It wasn't planned, Evelyn. It just happened. David was suffering so much, and Jason was always here helping, and I felt so lonely." Lonely, I exploded for the first time in my life. "You felt lonely, and my son. How did he feel while his wife was betraying him with his own brother?" The first turning point had arrived. They had been together far longer than I imagined. Tommy began to cry, frightened by my outburst. I picked him up and left the house without another word. In the car, my grandson told me more details with the cruel innocence of children. "Grandma, Uncle Jason always slept here when Daddy was at the doctor's place. They said it was a secret, and sometimes I heard Mommy crying at night. But when I asked, she said everything was fine. My heart broke once more. Sarah crying. Why? Out of guilt? Out of longing for her husband? Or was there something else I wasn't understanding? "Tommy, did your daddy know that Uncle Jason slept here?" I asked, trying to control my voice. "I don't know, Grandma. But once Daddy called late and talked to Uncle Jason. After that, Uncle was really sad." I got home with my head exploding in rage and confusion. I called my sister Rose, then my cousin Helen, then Evelyn Sullivan, David's best friend since school. I wanted everyone to know what kind of person Sarah really was. Rose, can you believe this? While my son was dying, she was already having an affair with Jason. Rose arrived at my house within an hour and found me pacing like a madwoman. "Evelyn, honey, take a deep breath. Are you sure you understood everything right? And even if you did, are you sure this is what David would have wanted you to do?" That question hit me like a punch to the stomach. David was always a reserved, proud man who hated being the center of attention for negative reasons. He would hate to be remembered as the man who was betrayed by his wife and brother. His reputation, his memory, his dignity, all of it would be stained forever. And Tommy? Poor Tommy, who would grow up knowing that his mother betrayed his father, and that the uncle he adored was complicit in that betrayal. I spent the whole afternoon replaying conversations, trying to make sense of signs I might have missed. In the last weeks, David seemed relieved, resigned. I thought it was acceptance of death, but what if it was something else? What if he knew something I didn't? That night, at 10:30, Sarah showed up at my door. Her eyes were red and swollen, but there was something different about her. A determination I had never seen before. "Evelyn, please, can we talk? There's so much you don't know." I let her in, but kept my distance. "What could you possibly have to say that would justify what you two did?" I asked, my voice as cold as Texas ice. Sarah sat in my favorite armchair, the same one where David used to sit when he visited me, and for a moment she looked like a stranger. She took several deep breaths, as if preparing to jump off a cliff. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, broken, but also angry. "You want to know the truth, Evelyn?" "The whole truth," she said, staring at me in a way that gave me chills. There was something in her eyes I had never seen before. She was no longer the submissive, quiet Sarah I knew. David wasn't the perfect man you think he was. I felt fury rise in my chest like volcanic lava. "How dare you speak that way about my dead son? Are you trying to smear his memory to justify what you did?" Sarah laughed. Laughed. A bitter, humorless laugh. "Justify? Evelyn, I don't need to justify anything. Your son used to hit me." The word struck me like a slap to the face. For 2 years, David beat me. When he drank, when he was stressed, when Tommy cried too much, when I burned dinner, when I forgot to pay a bill. She spoke as if reciting a shopping list, cold and methodical. The world began to spin around me. "You're lying!" I screamed, rising from my chair. "You're making this up to justify your betrayal." "My David would never—" "Your David would never what, Evelyn?" Sarah cut me off, standing as well. "Never hit a woman, just like your ex-husband never hit you?" I froze. How did she know about Robert? I had never told anyone about the first years of my marriage, about the nights I cried hidden in the bathroom, about the excuses I made for the bruises. Sarah pulled up her sleeve and showed me scars on her arm. Old marks, some still purple, others faded white over time. "Why do you think I never came to your Christmas parties, Evelyn? Why do you think David always made excuses for me not to go? Because he knew you'd notice the marks, just like you hid yours when Tommy was a baby." My mind was in total chaos. I remembered the times Sarah seemed distant at family gatherings, always wearing long sleeves, even in the scorching Texas heat. The times David spoke harshly to her in front of me, and I assumed it was just work stress, the way she seemed to shrink when he raised his voice. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I whispered, collapsing back into my chair. Tell who? The mother who idolized her son? The woman who spent years hiding her own marks and pretending she had the perfect marriage? Sarah sat down on the floor in front of me, like a child. "Evelyn, I knew about your ex-husband because David told me. He knew you had suffered violence, and even so, he did the same to me." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. I could hear my own heartbeat, the kitchen clock, the air conditioner turning on. Sarah remained sitting on the floor, watching me process everything she had just thrown in my face. "Evelyn," she said softly, "do you remember the time I fell down the stairs and broke my arm? It was 3 months before David found out he was sick." I remembered. David had called me in a panic, saying Sarah had tripped and fallen. I went to the hospital, stayed with Tommy while she recovered. David pushed me down the stairs during an argument about money. I had forgotten to pay the electric bill, and he came home drunk, found the bill on the table. Sarah touched her arm unconsciously. Tommy saw everything. That's why he's so afraid of stairs to this day. My stomach turned. Tommy always cried when he had to climb stairs. I thought it was just a normal childhood fear. And Jason, when did he start to get involved? Jason didn't get involved romantically, Evelyn. He got involved out of desperation. Sarah stood up, went to the window, staring at the house where she used to live with David. The night I broke my arm, it was Jason who took me to the hospital. David was too drunk to drive. On the way, Jason saw me crying and asked what had really happened. She turned to face me again. I told him everything. Every time David hit me, every night I stayed awake in fear, every lie I invented to protect your perfect son's image. Her voice grew stronger. Jason was in shock. He said he had no idea, that David had always been his hero. And then? Then Jason tried to talk to David. He came to our house the next day, confronted his brother. It was ugly. Sarah paused, as if reliving the scene. David denied everything at first, said I was making it up, that I was crazy. But Jason insisted, said he'd seen the bruise on my neck I tried to hide with makeup. My head was throbbing. What did David do? He confessed. He cried, begged for forgiveness, promised it would never happen again. Jason made him swear he'd get help, stop drinking. Sarah laughed bitterly. It lasted 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Evelyn. Then everything went back to the way it was. And Jason? Jason started coming over more often. At first, only when he knew David was drunk or aggressive. He slept on the couch, on the floor, wherever, just so Tommy and I wouldn't be alone with David. Sarah went back to the armchair, curling into it like a frightened child. For months, that was all it was. Jason protecting me, being the shield between me and your son's rage. Until it stopped being just protection, I said, more statement than question. Sarah nodded slowly. Until one day, I couldn't take the loneliness anymore. Evelyn, not the loneliness of not having a husband, the loneliness of not having anyone touch me with kindness instead of anger. Jason was gentle with me, treated me like a person, not a punching bag. She looked me in the eyes, and I fell in love with him, completely. I spent the whole night unable to sleep, wandering through the house like a restless soul. Every corner reminded me of David as a child, a teenager, an adult. Now I was replaying every conversation, every visit, every moment we had shared in recent years, searching for signs I should have seen. The bruised hands he always explained as work accidents. The way Tommy literally hid behind me whenever his father raised his voice. Sarah always nervous, always apologizing for trivial things, always agreeing with everything David said. How could I have been so blind? I remembered one time, a year ago, when I dropped by their house unannounced and found Sarah with a bruise on her neck. She said she had bumped into the cabinet door, and I believed her. Jesus Christ, how could I have believed such a ridiculous excuse? And that same day, David was unusually attentive with her, bringing tea, adjusting the pillows. I thought it was tenderness. It was guilt. At 6 a.m, I couldn't take it anymore. I called Jason. We need to talk, now, and I won't take no for an answer. My voice was different, harder. He must have noticed, because he didn't ask questions. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Auntie. When Jason arrived, he looked like he had aged 10 years in a week. Red eyes, unshaven, wrinkled clothes. Aunt Evelyn, he began, but I raised my hand. Is it true what Sarah told me about David hitting her? I asked bluntly. I had no patience left for delicacy. Jason collapsed onto my couch. He didn't sit, he collapsed. And then he started crying in a way I had never seen a grown man cry. Deep, soul-wrenching sobs, tears flowing like broken dams. I tried to stop him, Auntie. Jesus Christ, how I tried. Why did you never tell me? I asked, but my anger was already turning into something else. Guilt, pain, shame at having failed as a mother-in-law, the protector of the family. David begged us, Auntie. He said he had already disappointed everyone in his life, that he couldn't disappoint his mother too. Jason wiped his face with his hands. And God forgive me, I still believed my brother could change, that it was just a bad phase. But Jason, my voice came out broken, my ex-husband hit me too, at the beginning of our marriage. David saw that when he was little. He knew what domestic violence did to a family. Jason looked at me with an expression I will never forget. Pure horror. Auntie, David once told me that Mr. Robert had never laid a hand on you, that you two were the example of a perfect marriage he wanted to follow. I froze. Did David not remember? Or had he chosen to forget? To bury those memories so he could live with what he was doing? Auntie, Jason said, lifting his head to look straight at me, I need to tell you something else, something even Sarah doesn't know. My stomach churned. More secrets. In his last week of life, David called me at the hospital. It was nighttime. You had gone home to rest. He was lucid, more lucid than he had been in weeks. Jason paused. He apologized to me for everything, and he made me promise I would take care of Sarah and Tommy for the rest of my life. And you promised? I promised, and then he said something that changed everything. Jason took a deep breath. He said, Jason, I know about you two, and I want you to know that I understand. David gave us his blessing, I repeated, the words leaving my mouth as if in a foreign language. Jason, for God's sake, explain this properly. What do you mean he knew? For how long? Jason pulled his phone from his pocket, his hands trembling so badly he almost dropped it. He made me promise to record a message. He said that if anyone ever found out about me and Sarah and questioned our relationship, I should show them this. My heart raced. David had left a recorded message. Was he conscious when he recorded it? I asked. Because in his last days he was so medicated he sometimes didn't even recognize me. Completely conscious. It was the day before he slipped into a coma. Jason looked at the phone as if it were a bomb. Auntie, are you sure you want to hear it? Because once you hear it, there's no going back. I nodded, though my whole body was tense. Jason pressed play, and suddenly the room filled with my son's voice. Weak, halting, but unmistakably his. Jason, if you're showing this to someone, it means they found out about you and Sarah. My legs buckled. I sank heavily into the rocking chair where David used to sit as a child when he had nightmares. I want you to know that I've known everything for months. Since that night, I called home and you answered at 2 a.m. Jason, Sarah was asleep, and you were taking care of her after I hurt her. His voice cracked on the recording. And I want you to know that I understand. I began to cry. Silent tears I couldn't hold back. David continued. I was a terrible husband, Jason. A violent man who hurt the woman I had promised to protect. I broke every vow I made at the altar. I broke Sarah inside and out. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know that my last months were filled with deep, deep regret. There was a long pause, and I could hear David's labored breathing. Jason, thank you for protecting my family when all I could do was destroy it. Sarah, if you're hearing this, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to be touched with kindness, not anger. You deserve to be truly loved. My soul was shattering. And Mom. His voice turned into a painful whisper. Mom, if you ever hear this, please don't hate me, but don't hate them either. Jason and Sarah found each other in my darkness and managed to bring light to one another. It's the only good thing that came out of the mess I created. Jason paused the recording, tears in his eyes. There's more, Auntie. Do you want to hear it? I didn't want to. My heart couldn't take more revelations, but I nodded, because I needed the whole truth, no matter how much it hurt. There's more, Jason whispered, pressing play again. And what David said next changed everything I thought I knew about my family. David's voice returned, weaker than ever. And Mom, there's something I never had the courage to tell you. Remember when you asked why I started drinking so much after Tommy was born? Why I became so aggressive? A long pause. It's because Tommy isn't my son. The world stopped, literally stopped. I looked at Jason, who seemed just as shocked as I was. He hadn't known this part either. David continued on the recording. Sarah never knew that I found out. But I took a DNA test 2 years ago when I started having doubts. Tommy is the son of my ex-best friend, Marcus. Sarah had an affair with him before she realized she was pregnant, but thought the baby was mine. When I discovered the truth, that's what drove me to start hitting her. I know, it's no excuse. Nothing justifies violence. But I raised a child who wasn't mine, loved him as if he were, and every day I looked at him, I saw betrayal. Jason paused the recording, completely stunned. Aunt Evelyn, I swear I didn't know this. Keep going, I whispered, needing to hear it all. That's why, Jason, when I saw you two together, I even felt relief. Sarah was never truly mine from the beginning. And Tommy already had another biological father anyway. You two can give him the family he deserves. And Mom, Tommy is still your grandson at heart, just as he was my son at heart. Love isn't in the blood. The recording ended. The silence was deafening. 6 years. 6 years I had loved that boy as my legitimate grandson. And I would go on loving him, because David was right. Love isn't in the blood. What else do I need to know about Sarah? I asked, exhausted. I felt as if I had been run over by a truck, trampled by a herd of horses, and still had to run a marathon. How many bombs can a family endure before it completely implodes? Jason took a deep breath, as if preparing to deliver the final blow. On the day David died, a few hours after he passed, Sarah came to me in the hospital parking lot. I was smoking, trying to process that I had just lost my brother. He paused, running his hands through his hair. She came close to me and said something that changed everything. What? She said, Jason, I need to tell you something before someone finds out by accident. About Tommy. Jason looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Aunt Evelyn, Sarah always knew that Tommy wasn't David's son. It felt like a punch to the stomach. What do you mean she always knew? Marcus was her boyfriend in college. They broke up horribly. He cheated on her with her best friend. Sarah was devastated, started dating David on the rebound to forget the pain. Jason stood up, pacing the room like a caged animal. When she found out she was pregnant, she did the math. Either Marcus or David could have been the father. And she chose to believe it was David. Worse than that, Auntie, she chose to make David believe it was his, knowing there was a 50-50 chance it wasn't. Jason stopped in front of me. Marcus was already engaged to someone else when Sarah discovered the pregnancy. His life was set. Perfect. Sarah didn't want to destroy that. My mind was spinning. So she lied deliberately? For 6 whole years. But here's the part that shocked me most, Auntie. Jason sat on the edge of the coffee table, staring at me. Sarah told me Marcus came to her 6 months ago. He had divorced his wife and was going through an existential crisis. He started doing the math, remembering dates, and suspected Tommy could be his son. And what did he do? He asked for a DNA test. Sarah agreed, but didn't tell David at first. Jason paused. The results came back the same day David stumbled home drunk with another test in his hand. He had done one secretly, too, because he suspected Sarah's strange behavior. I was starting to see the whole picture, and it was uglier than I imagined. And then, Sarah told me it was the only day David didn't hit her after such a revelation. He just looked at her and said, "So now we're both liars." They went to separate rooms that night and never shared a bed again. Jason shook his head. Auntie, their marriage died that day. What came after was just theater. And Marcus, does he know Tommy is his son? He knows, and not only does he know, he wants to be part of the boy's life. Jason looked at me seriously. Auntie, Marcus isn't a monster. He got married too young, to the wrong person, under family pressure. The divorce freed him to be who he really is, and he wants to know his son. My head throbbed. And Sarah? Does she want that too? That's where things get complicated, Auntie. Sarah does want Tommy to know his biological father, but she also wants something that will shock you. Jason paused dramatically. She wants you to continue being his official grandmother. She wants our strange family to keep existing, only now with one more person. Marcus. Why? Because for the past 6 years, you've been the only constant positive in Tommy's life. The only person who loved him unconditionally, without secrets, without lies, without violence. Sarah was standing at my living room door. We didn't know how long she had been there, listening. Sarah entered the room as if she owned my house, which both irritated me and impressed me at the same time. There was something different about her, a confidence I had never seen before. How long have you been standing there listening? I asked, trying to keep my dignity intact. Long enough to know that Jason told you about Marcus. She sat in David's armchair without asking for permission, and long enough to realize that you're judging my choices without knowing the whole story. The whole story, I repeated, almost laughing nervously. Sarah, how many complete stories are there in this family? Because I've already heard about betrayal, domestic violence, false paternity, secret recordings. What else could there be? Sarah looked at Jason, who nodded as if they had rehearsed this. Evelyn, do you want to know why I really agreed to let Marcus do the DNA test? Why I didn't fight it, didn't deny it, didn't try to protect the secret? Why? I asked, already tired of asking that word. Because Tommy had started asking questions I didn't know how to answer. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed me a picture of Tommy at age 4, next to a picture of Marcus at the same age. The resemblance was chilling, not just the green eyes, but the shape of the face, the smile, even the way they tilted their heads. My God, I whispered, how did we not see this before? Because you all saw what you wanted to see. David saw a son. You saw a grandson. I saw a lie that was becoming harder and harder to maintain. Sarah put away her phone. Tommy started asking why he looked nothing like David. Why his eyes were green when neither David nor I had green eyes. Kids are too curious for poorly built lies, Jason spoke up. And then there was that school project, remember, Auntie? What project? I asked, because no one ever told me anything in this family. Tommy had to make a family tree, Sarah explained. The teacher asked him to draw where his physical traits came from. Tommy got confused because he couldn't trace where his green eyes, his nose shape, his hair color came from. She paused. He came home crying, asking if he was adopted. My heart ached. And what did you tell him? David was furious. Not at Tommy, but at the situation. He yelled at me that night, said I had to find a way to explain it to the boy. Sarah touched her arm unconsciously, where I knew the scars were. It was during that fight that David broke my rib. He broke your rib. Jason stood up, shocked. You never told me that. Because you were already carrying too much guilt, Jason. But yes, that fight about the family tree ended with a broken rib and 2 weeks of lies to everyone about me falling off my bike. Sarah looked directly at me. It was after that night that Marcus reached out to me, as if the universe was conspiring. Marcus knew about the family tree project, I asked. No, but he had seen Tommy on the street near school a few days earlier, and something about the boy made him stop his car and look twice. Sarah smiled for the first time. Marcus called me that night. He said, Sarah, I need to ask you a very strange question. That boy I saw, is he my son? The silence in the room was heavy. And you told him the truth? I told him it was possible, and I asked if he really wanted to know. Sarah walked to the window where she could see Tommy playing in the yard with toys I had bought him. Evelyn, do you want to know the first thing Marcus said when we confirmed Tommy was his son? What was the first thing Marcus said? I asked, holding my breath. He said, I want to be the father he deserves, not the father I never had. Sarah turned to face me, tears in her eyes. Evelyn, Marcus's father abandoned him when he was 5 years old. He grew up promising himself that if he ever had a child, he would be different. Something stirred in my chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was a strange feeling of hope mixed with terror. And you believe him? I spent 3 months observing him, Evelyn. Marcus came here several times just to see Tommy from a distance, at the park, at school, without approaching. He wanted to be sure of his feelings before introducing himself. Sarah sat down again. He cried when he saw Tommy up close for the first time. Cried like I've never seen a man cry. Jason spoke. Auntie, I met Marcus. He's changed a lot since college. The divorce, the therapy, the search for Tommy. He became a different man. Therapy? I asked, because that word always caught my attention. Marcus did 2 years of therapy to understand why his marriage didn't work, Sarah explained. He discovered he married because of social pressure, not love, and that he was trying to fill a void only fatherhood could fill. She paused. Evelyn, he wants to meet Tommy gradually, without pressure, without taking him away from you or from us. The following Saturday, we arranged the meeting. I insisted on being the one to introduce Marcus to Tommy, because I wanted to observe their reactions. Marcus arrived at exactly 2 p.m. Punctuality has always impressed me in a person. He was visibly nervous, holding a wrapped gift under his arm and an insecure smile on his face. When he saw Tommy for the first time, his legs literally gave out. He leaned against the car, trying to compose himself. My God, he looks exactly like me at that age, he whispered to Sarah. Tommy, with a child's natural curiosity, walked up without fear. Who are you? He asked directly, in the blunt way only children can. Marcus crouched down to his level, and I could see his hands trembling. Hi, Tommy. I'm a friend of your mom's. My name is Marcus. His voice was shaky. Tommy studied him for a few seconds, then looked at me, then at Sarah. And then he asked the question none of us were prepared for. "You have the same eyes as me. Are you my real dad?" The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus looked at Sarah, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Then he looked at me, silently asking for permission. I took a deep breath and nodded too. "Tommy," Marcus said, voice breaking. "Yes, I'm your biological father, but—" He glanced at where David's photo used to be. "You also had another dad who loved you very much, and now you have Jason, who takes care of you, and you have Grandma Evelyn, who loves you more than anything." Marcus held Tommy's little hands. "You're not losing anyone. You're gaining more people to love you." Tommy processed this with the strange wisdom of children and asked, "Can I call you Daddy Marcus?" "I'd love that," Marcus whispered, and began to cry. Then Tommy did something that broke my heart. He looked up at the sky and said, "Daddy David, Daddy Marcus is here. He seems nice." Then he looked back at Marcus and added, "Daddy David always said, love doesn't take up space. Can I love you too?" At that moment, I realized that my 6-year-old grandson was wiser than all of us adults put together, and that maybe, just maybe, our broken family could become something beautiful. In the weeks that followed, our strange family began to find a new balance. Marcus visited Tommy twice a week. Jason and Sarah made their relationship official, and I had to relearn who my son David truly was. One day, while organizing David's belongings still stored in my attic, I found a diary. The first pages were from the David I knew, writing about work, plans, dreams, but the final pages belonged to a tormented man. "Mom can never know what kind of monster I've become," one entry read. I hit Sarah and then stare at my hands, wondering how I got to this point. Dad never hit you. How could I break the only promise I made? To be better than him. Another entry. Today Tommy looked at me with fear. The same fear I had for Grandpa when I was a kid. Is it hereditary? Am I just like the old man I swore to hate forever? I had forgotten. My ex-husband, David's father, truly had been violent with me in the early years of our marriage. David saw it when he was little. I thought he wouldn't remember, since he was so young when his father changed after getting professional help. The final diary entry was devastating. Today I discovered Tommy isn't my son. I feel a mix of pain and relief. Maybe he won't carry this curse that seems to pass from father to son in our family. Maybe he has a chance to be different. I closed the diary, weeping. My son had battled demons I never even knew existed, and he lost. But at least he was aware of the fight. 6 months after David's funeral, our strange family was working better than any normal family I had ever known. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was real. And for the first time in years, there was light in our days. Tommy now called Marcus Daddy Marcus without hesitation. He also spoke of Daddy David with tenderness, often pointing to the sky and saying things like, "Daddy David is watching me play baseball today." Jason had officially become his stepfather, but he never tried to erase his brother's memory. Instead, he made space for it, telling Tommy stories of David's childhood, stories that made the boy laugh instead of cry. Sarah was smiling again, but not the forced smile she used to put on at family gatherings. It was genuine. It came from deep inside. The scars on her body were fading. But what truly amazed me was that the scars on her soul were also beginning to heal. She had found a new job, one where she was respected. She and Jason moved into a modest new house, freshly painted and filled with hope. For the first time, I saw her happy, not pretending, not surviving, but truly living. Marcus, to my surprise, proved to be a devoted and gentle father. He picked Tommy up every weekend, teaching him little things that made his eyes shine: how to throw a baseball properly, how to fix a flat tire on a bike, how to polish shoes before Sunday service. He wasn't trying to be a hero, just a present father. And that was enough. And me? I had to confront the hardest truth, that a mother's love can blind us. I had spent decades seeing only the son I wanted David to be, ignoring the signs that he was suffering and, worse, making others suffer. My denial had protected me, but it had also imprisoned me. One evening, Tommy and I were baking cookies together when he looked up at me and asked, "Grandma, why did Daddy David get mad sometimes?" It was the first time he had spoken so directly about it. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to tell him the truth, in words a 6-year-old could hold, because he had a very big sadness in his heart, and he didn't know how to heal it. But even with that sadness, he loved you very, very much. Tommy paused, studying my face. Then he nodded slowly. "So the sadness went away when he died?" I stroked his hair gently. "Yes, sweetheart. Now he's at peace." He smiled faintly and said, "Then I can be happy for him, because when I die, I don't want to take sadness with me." I froze. In that moment, I realized this child carried more wisdom than all of us adults put together. And for the first time since the funeral, I truly believed my own words. David was at peace. Today, when I look back, I realize something that shakes me to my core. All of us carried secrets we thought would protect the people we loved. Sarah kept the secret about Tommy's father. David kept the secret about his violence. Jason kept the secret of knowing everything but staying silent. And I, perhaps the biggest betrayal of all, I kept the secret of the violence in my own marriage, thinking silence would protect my son. But in the end, it was those very secrets that almost destroyed us. Lies rot in silence. They fester in the dark. And when they finally come to light, they explode with a force that can shatter generations. Memory, which I always thought was a gentle blessing of age, became my sharpest weapon, not to hurt, but to finally see. To connect dots I had ignored for years. To realize that true love is not about closing your eyes to flaws, but opening them wide and still choosing to love, or having the courage to walk away when love turns into poison. Today, Tommy has 3 father figures: the tender memory of David, the steady presence of Marcus, and Jason's daily care. He doesn't lack love. He overflows with it. Sarah has a relationship built on respect, gentleness, and second chances. And me? I finally found peace in knowing that, despite everything, my family carved out a path to healing. But peace doesn't erase pain. Sometimes, at night, I still hear David's voice in my dreams, apologizing. Sometimes I still ask myself if I could have saved him, if I had spoken out sooner, if I had broken my silence earlier. The guilt is part of me now, stitched into my skin like a scar. But scars are proof we survived. The truth hurts, it cuts, it bleeds, it leaves marks. But lies kill slowly, silently, until nothing is left. If you've made it this far, perhaps you too carry secrets that weigh heavy on your soul. Maybe you too have stayed silent, convincing yourself you were protecting someone, when in truth you were imprisoning everyone. And you, have you ever realized that your silence was not protection, but poison? That your love became complicity in someone else's suffering? Tell me your story in the comments. Sometimes, sharing is the only way to break the cycle, to stop pain from dripping into the next generation. Subscribe, share, and remember, we all have an Evelyn inside us, a woman who finally found the courage to open her eyes, to see beyond what she wanted to see, and to discover that, even in broken families, there can still be light.